So I'd like to bring up Geoffrey Moore, who's going to give an amazing presentation about how technology is changing, how we're moving to a more collaborative model with our information. For those of you that don't know, which I think would be impossible, Geoffrey Moore is the author of Crossing the Chasm, Inside the Tornado, so really one of the true sort of philosophers and I think writers of our time around showing what is going on in software and how that changes and how we can build the most innovative technologies possible, and I'm a huge fan. So Geoffrey, thank you so much. Thank you.
So Aaron was talking about technology adoption lifecycle, and there are early adopters, and this is kind of an early adopter fest. And then you listen to Steve and Craig, who are in a bridge situation, where they're wanting to bridge between the early adopter ideas that they have and the vendors that they integrate with and the rest of their organizations. In order to do that, for the rest of the organization to come on board, to cross the chasm, to get inside the tornado, there has to be a narrative that the rest of the organization can embrace. And it's not the narrative that we've been doing this morning. This morning's been a narrative of early adoption. That's not the narrative that will cause the rest of the organization to embrace. So what I want to do in the next 30 minutes is not preach to the choir, although it's a lovely choir, and you guys do a beautiful wave. But I actually want to model for you the narrative that I would like you to take out to the constituencies that are less early adopting, that you engage with, to help this thing happen sooner rather than later. Because in case you haven't noticed, we have a little productivity problem in the developed economies. We need a little help, and this is the kind of stuff that really does help, but only if it gets used and gets embraced. So this notion of the future of enterprise IT, from systems of record to systems of engagement. When I started with enterprise IT, when many of the people in this room started, it was all about transaction systems, what we call systems of record. And we built out many different kinds of transaction systems, and we put them on many different platforms. And that basically was the 20th century, starting with kind of IBM and ending with client server, right? At the end of the decade. We spent trillions of dollars on this enterprise. And we spent trillions of dollars of our enterprise colleagues' money that they didn't get to spend on other stuff, right? And then at the last minute, we got to Y2K, we said, oh, and we need one more big shipment just in case, right? So that was necessary. I think the rest of our colleagues who are not in IT, think of this as the building of the interstate highway system. If you don't have one, you have to have one. But once you have one, you don't have to fund it over and over and over again. And so what we've seen in the last decade is the budgets of enterprise IT have been going down and down and down because essentially our colleagues have said, enough already. It wasn't that great. The enterprise rainbow didn't really pay off. I kind of get that this is table stakes, but surely to maintain the system should not cost as much as it does to build it out. And so there's been a retrenchment in IT, and IT has come to stand for a cost center, not a competitive advantage center, and it's been a conservative decade. Meanwhile, as Mark Andreessen said, during that very same decade, consumer IT just went through the roof. And so if you look at that, and you look at the consumer IT principles that we're now going to try to bring into the enterprise, I think there are three things that have fundamentally changed the planet by virtue of the fact that we're all participating in a digital universe in a way that was unimaginable, certainly for me when I was growing up. And the three things are access, which was the first. That was the Google anything and find out anything experience, which to this day is just absolutely remarkable. So now you don't need to ship a manual with anything, because even if you had the manual, you wouldn't look at it. You would Google it. How the hell do you make this thing work? And the first thing that comes up on Google will be better than what's in the manual, right? So all of a sudden, access has become just dramatically different. I did a doctoral degree. I went to a place called a library, and a place called the stacks in the library, right? I mean, it was very, very parceled out information. Well, it's all out there in a way that, and now think about this in the context of an enterprise. All of a sudden, it's all out there has some, scary implications, but the access implication of consumer is infinite access to anything I want. That's the standard that enterprise IT is now going to have to try to come back and meet. The second one, and we often forget this, is broadband. Broadband changed computing from being an intellectual activity to being a completely human activity. So first it was photos, and then it was videos. And between the two of them, we have rich emotional lives digitally. In fact, if you talk to young millennials, or actually almost post-millennials, they will say, my digital life is more real to me than my physical social life. Okay? I mean, it's that compelling, it's that compulsive, it's that deep. So again, think about that in the context of the enterprise and the kinds of negotiations. In my whole life, you got on an airplane if you cared about your client, and you had a face-to-face meeting. That is not where this is going. That is not where this is going. But again, it's a very, very big change going forward. And then the third thing is mobile. And for the developing economy, mobile is the first computer. And so when Mark was talking about going from hundreds of millions to 2 billion, moving to 4 to 5 billion endpoints of this thing, that's the big thing for consumer. But for business, it is much more of the 24/7 instant access, low latency opportunity, because nobody is at their desk anymore. That's why the desktop business is a bad business now, because nobody's at their desk, right? And so as a result, we're playing the game differently. So we have these three killer changes that we've seen have transformed the globe as consumers, and the question now is, what does it mean for the enterprise? And you got to realize when you're talking to the enterprise, when you're talking to line of business managers, to the CFO, et cetera, this is an inherently conservative institution. Like, I get that there's power here. Frankly, I'm scared to death of unintended consequences. And so again, this is why this narrative is important to be able to do. But the fundamental narrative begins with the fact that the experience of being a consumer on the weekend is you are master of the universe, and then you show up at the enterprise on Monday and you are dumber than dirt, right? And it's like, how is this possible? And what in the world is going to help change it? Now, part of the problem, and Steve referred to this when he said, you know, every other conference I go to, you know, we start by defining cloud. And then Aaron made the point that's because people don't know. People are not cloud people trying to explain things like, a little bit like teenagers or third graders trying to explain sex to each other. We have to define it, right? It's like, no. So if you have to define it, you probably don't know what it is. But here's I want to talk about how it's playing out. Because there's actually two separate narratives around cloud, and it's a little bit like men are from Mars and women are from Venus. So here's the IT narrative. The IT narrative is cloud. We've been doing cloud for 30 years, 40 years. This is where we started, guys. You know, servers, storage, networks, we're virtualizing it. We're using Rackspace or Savvis or Terramark or you know, whoever the current data centers of Equinix, whatever it is. Managed hosting, yeah, we're doing some of that. We have some in-house, but we're on the path. You know, enterprise apps over. We're using maybe, if we're not using Salesforce, we might be using Salesforce. Maybe not so much the other ones, but we're there. You can kind of see these guys saying, you know, and we know there's a platform for composite apps. We're on the path. It'll take a decade, but you know what? This is an evolutionary thing, and we're not Luddites in IT. We're moving ahead from a systems of record perspective. At the same time, there is an end user community who's going, I don't even know what you're talking about, right? What I want is info on demand, whenever I want it, when I want it. I want instant communication with my colleagues, just like I have on the weekends, you know, with my friends and family. I need to get instantly oriented to problems through technologies that just show up and are wonderful. And I want to be able to have high bandwidth communication venues so that I can share ideas about products and whatever and negotiate with people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you look at that. And the first group was saying cloud was a technological evolution. This group is saying, no, it's not. It is a procedural or process or cultural revolution. And that's why Craig and Steve were talking so much about change management when they were just up here. Because fundamentally, this is what the end user community expectations are. And the mismatch with that, with the IT organizations that we built over the last 40 years, is pretty great. So there's a lot of the talent in the IT organization, which is real talent, is talent for the old model. There are not a lot of user experience design people in IT organizations right now. But this is all about user experience. This is fundamentally about user experience in the context of business relationships, not in the context of social, personal relationships. So it's an evolution in infrastructure meets a revolution in infrastructure. And the issue is, and we can still, you know, we can take advantage of the evolutionary parts, but that's not what's the really important stuff. It's not important to save money. I mean, yes, it is important to free up time so that we're not managing servers, so we're not doing blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, it's not enough. It's got to also embrace the revolution in applications and the way in which just you think about getting things done. When you listen to Aaron up here, most IT people in my life, when they talked about IT, talked about products. Aaron talks about verbs. And then he adds the adjective or modifier simple to a verb. And Box is about verbs. And cloud is about verbs, not about nouns. It's not about integrating another noun into a system of nouns. It's about enabling things increasingly, more flexible. So you look at that and you think, wow, that's a big disconnect. I spend a lot of time with CIOs, and right now, I mean, they totally get what's going on here, but they look, boy, am I out of position. I just feel like I have the wrong team in the wrong sport, right? And I'm supposed to field it like tomorrow, right? Okay, so what's going to push this thing forward? What is going to bring the more conservative element to the table faster? As always with IT, the change starts with the line of business, not with the IT organization. The driver has to start from the business side. And the driver actually, if you sort of think about this globally, if you think about the last 10 to 15 years of our lives, we started an outsourcing phenomenon in the early 90s, which was essentially initially kind of a labor arbitrage. Let's just get things done more cheaply. What that did, of course, was create these incredible centers of global economy in China and in India and elsewhere, which are absolutely remarkable. I mean, the notion that we could somehow raise the economies of China and India in my lifetime to become the second largest economy in the world in the case of China was just inconceivable. This is the most amazing act of foreign aid that's ever been done on the planet, right? But what it's done, of course, is it's created a flood of lower cost goods and services into our economy. And what that does is that puts every developed economy company on notice, because all of a sudden the margins of a protected market are gone. And now if you're going to get those margins, you have to differentiate in some way that people are saying, wow, I'm willing to pay you the marginal difference between your price and the other guy's price because you really, really are better. And by the way, America in particular is very good at being different, okay, and differentiating. But in order to make it work, what we found is we have to specialize. We can't do it all anymore. And so we have this model increasingly where we say we want to double down on our core, but we want to outsource or get rid of our context, the things that don't value add. Core is where we add our differentiated value. Context is everything else. Well, what that leads to is, okay, well, that means I've got to, at some point, stop trying to do everything, and I've got to give to other vendors or other people in my value chain or my value ecosystem more and more of the work that I used to do, so I can spend more of my time on the stuff that makes us really, really different. Okay? So that leads to this virtuous circle, or vicious circle, depending on how you're going to look at it, but basically it's a Darwinian circle. And basically the people that keep up with it, that's why I think what Steve said, the opportunity cost of not acting in a Darwinian system is getting caught by the lion. You don't have to outrun every antelope. You just have to outrun the slowest antelope, right? Because that's the one that's going to get caught by the lion. So you got to keep moving. This is a moving thing. And so if you look at this from the point of view of business-to-business interactions, so we've seen what's happening in the business-to-consumer. But in the business-to-business interactions, what that model has done is when I joined business originally, it was a hierarchically organized system of generalists. And over my lifetime in business, it has reorganized into a horizontally disaggregated system of specialists. Now, in that model, the transaction costs of keeping all those specialists linked up with each other is huge. But when it works, it's incredibly powerful and very capital efficient. So you got to invest more and more in making that work. Now, the first level of investments were the global systems of record. The ERP systems and all this stuff that we're kind of having a little bit of fun with, you can't start this game without an interstate highway system. But now, we got that part. That's not where the value add's coming in the future. Value add's going to come from the future from having technologies, information technology, for communication, collaboration, coordination. Much of that information is in computers, but a whole bunch is just in people's heads, okay? Now, if you're going to be the enterprise information, CIO, there's nothing that says if the information isn't in a database, you can say, well, that doesn't mean anything. Then I'm not responsible. Yes, you are. You're responsible for connecting other people's heads to each other. Okay? And that's what the communication and collaboration technology is all about. That's why it has to be so simple. That's why all those little updates from Box.net, all that stuff. It's because we're trying to get people's heads together. We're not trying to connect somebody into a systems of records database. The answers aren't, now, some of the answers are there, but many of the answers, particularly to the exception conditions, are in other people's heads, and we need to collaborate to get at them, as that demo with the agency shows. So we want to engage each other's peers, and now all of a sudden, this notion of having systems of engagement as opposed to systems of record starts to become pretty interesting. So what's happening is we look at this collaboration burden, and it doesn't fall. You know, if you think about the IT investment in the first wave with the systems of record, we spent a lot of time automating the transaction layer of our business models, the workflows. It was stuff that was done relatively by first level, maybe second level management, or first level workers, line workers. And we also created business intelligence for the big bosses at the top. We didn't do anything for the people in the middle. The middle manager was kind of the forgotten player in this thing. Well, guess what? The middle manager is now the new star of the show. Because in a disaggregated value ecosystem, it's not the CEO that negotiates anything, and it's not the first-line transaction worker. It's everybody in between. And so the BlackBerry was an early gift to this group, the laptop computer, but basically not much. We have really not in IT for the middle tier. But that's what all this stuff is about. It's about empowered middle people, not CEOs, not first-line transaction workers, who are being able to make better discretionary decisions because they're better informed and they're better able to connect with each other. And so this issue, this mantra that you hear over and over again, whether you're listening to a venture capitalist like Mark or you're listening to a CIO like Steve and Craig, is mobile, social, ad hoc, real time, you know, that kind of stuff. That's what it takes in order to begin to collapse the latency problem of solving tough issues across a value ecosystem. And that's the world we live in now. Things are built on different continents than from where they're designed and from where they're sold. And we have supply chains and we have delivery chains that are incredibly extended, and it works just great except when it doesn't. Right? And then you need to engage with this. But they don't combine well. And in particular, differentiation and neutralization do not tie well together at all. Whenever you put those two objectives into one release train, you're either going to slow down neutralization or dumb down differentiation. And in either case, you're going to get a bad outcome. And this is how you can spend a lot of money on R&D and not get anything like that rainbow return that you want to get from it. The other thing is best in class, which we hear a lot when we talk to IT organizations. Best in class is good for productivity, but not for the other two. Best in class isn't good enough for differentiation, because it's still in class. You need to be beyond class. And best in class is way too good for neutralization, because you need to be there good enough, fast enough. So this vocabulary, as you work with your colleagues to find the opportunities to invest in systems of engagement, and it won't be like spreading it like peanut butter. You'll find places here, there, and the next place. I hope you can use this model of sitting down with a colleague and say, are we trying to enable differentiation, genuine differentiation? Because people like to say it, but usually, I mean unmatchable, and you kind of have to stare them in the eyes and sort of give them that mom stare that sometimes little kids, like, are you really? Are we playing neutralization, which is fine, but then let's play to that speed standard and good enough standard, or are we playing to just take costs out of the game, and then let's take a lot of costs out of the game, and let's play that game. So, systems of record, here to stay. We're not abandoning them. The fact that is, Mark got up here and was saying he thinks Oracle's going to outlive Mr. Andreessen and Mr. Moore combined. Because the Golden Gate Bridge is sunk 78 feet into bedrock. You cannot run the world without these systems, okay? But they are not where the next marginal return on a dollar is going to come from. That's the key point. We've gotten 95% of the value we're ever going to get from those systems has already been captured. Whereas about 5% of the value from systems of engagement have been captured. So there's just an incredible opportunity to get return on this next set of infrastructure in terms of where it goes. And so in thinking about this, you know, in the old day, Mark talked about how, Andreessen talked about how we used to innovate at the core and it would trickle out to the edge. And then he said in the last decade it's going the other way. It really is going the other way. One of the reasons that a company like Box.net is, I think, has an opportunity to capture so much ground so quickly is that it doesn't have, you know, it doesn't have an install base, right? It's moving with the times, and then keeping that mission of being in service to those of us who do have installed bases. And yet at the same time helping to bring the fresh energy into the system. That's the deal. So that's what I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much. I'm going to turn the stage back over to everybody else. Thanks a lot.